Oh, you did? I
I mean,
they're collected, yeah. That's always a good sign.
Temporary.
We would get one of town, so they screwed up on that.
Whenever you're ready. Everyone's ready, not going.
Okay, I'll put the light on and okay, we're ready?
Yeah.
All right. I want to officially call to order the New Shoreham Town Planning Board meeting for Wednesday, November 13th. First thing on the agenda is approval of the 2025 annual meeting schedule. You have a copy in front of you. I went through and checked, all the dates line up just fine. And we are meeting consistently at 4 o'clock so that we can't, shall we say, mess it up. Any questions, comments?
Nope.
No, good. Okay. Hearing none, I will make a motion that we approve the annual meeting schedule for 2025. Do I have a second?
Second.
Okay, thank you. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Anyone
Aye.
opposed? Motion carries. All right. That was easy. All right, number 2. Tents and storage containers. Discuss and act on a request from the town council to consider an ordinance regulating tents and storage containers and other auxiliary uses in all zones on the island. All right. You have a draft in front of you of some suggestions, and I'll turn it over to Michelle to walk us through this. She's got some good questions along the side for us to discuss, and we will continue to go forward on this.
Okay, before I get into this, did anybody have any specific questions that they wanted me to address?
Not yet.
And not yet. I think we probably will have some as we go along, because I have a couple questions as we get to different sections, as I'm sure everybody else does. So why don't we
Okay.
take it one section at a time and then see if there are questions, if that works for you?
Sure. On the first one where we have the definition of tent, at the last meeting, there was some discussion about distinguishing a tent from other, let's call them tent-like structures. Specifically mentioned were awnings, umbrellas, and canopies. So one of the things that was mentioned was that tents would be secured or anchored to the ground, where those other sort of things would not be. So I included that it does not include awnings, umbrellas, or canopies. I was discussing it with Karen, and we both feel that it doesn't necessarily need to go that far to exclude those, because by its very terms, it shouldn't include those. And right here, what we're trying to do is just provide enough of a definition for the enforcement officer to actually be able to enforce if there arises such a need. We also don't want to make this so exact that it's going to be an exercise of trying to juggle around it, so that when the zoning enforcement official needs to enforce the ordinance, they can't because it falls under some exemption. So I just wanted the planning board to sort of consider whether or not they do want to explicitly exclude awnings, umbrellas, or canopies, or just leave that sort of unsaid, because when it comes to enforcement, obviously those would not be enforced under a tent ordinance.
Comments?
When is a tent and not a canopy?
When it's a tent and the zoning enforcement officials says it's a tent and it meets the definition and they go to enforce it.
Is the definition of a tent? Does it become a tent when it has sides to it, and then when it's a canopy when it does not?
I think a canopy would be attached to some other structure instead of the ground. I think anything
Instead of the
that's
ground. Okay,
Okay.
thank you.
All right.
So would we be considering like what was at Three Sisters, a canopy? Is that a canopy?
It's not.
Because I'm sort of
attached to
feeling,
the-
I think I kind of agree with you, Michelle, where I feel like then we have to define what an awning and a canopy are, you know, and then we just get further and further down this rabbit hole. And I feel comfortable with the definition up to limited to, or not limited to pop-up
To
tents,
pop-up
such as structures,
Yeah.
and taking out the highlighted part, I think.
I agree with that. Chris, how do you feel?
I think it is a rabbit hole because I understand the pop-up structures. That makes sense. We actually asked for that definition. But like I said, if you're going to eliminate that, people are going to use something else. And then are we going to eliminate that? Like
Yeah.
at the end of the day, they're there for a purpose. And if you don't give like the purpose, from what I understand, we want to eliminate these because they're unsightly, for the lack of a better term.
Mhm.
If there was a different structure there that provided shade, would it be agreeable? Then to me, that would mean awning, umbrella, canopy. So if you're going to include that in this definition, I don't agree with eliminating all options for people to use. You have to have.
I think that that's the point. If we don't include it in the statute, I'm sorry, if we don't include it in the definition, it's not necessarily, it doesn't mean that it is included if we don't specifically exempt it. That's why we left the definition somewhat broad enough for a reasonable interpretation. One can say that a umbrella is clearly not a tent as defined here. And obviously, if these things are used and are not objectionable under the zoning ordinance, it's not going to be enforced by the zoning official. So in terms of if there's an issue where someone has a canopy or an awning and aren't sure if it would fall under this definition, then they would go get an opinion from the zoning enforcement officer saying that, yeah, what you have here is an awning. It doesn't fall under this definition as a tent. And then that would leave that sort of flexibility with the zoning enforcement officer rather than trying to forecast all the different possibilities of what somebody might try and call their structure and then have them try and fit it in one of the exemptions.
Okay, I think we're in agreement that you can remove the section that is highlighted in blue. Okay,
You mean
meaning,
starting with tents and.
tents do not include awnings, umbrellas, canopies, or such similar temporary or permanent structures which provide shelter constructed of fabric or pliable material which is supported by an existing structure if they are otherwise lawfully permitted by the terms of this ordinance. So we agree that that's not necessary.
But the remainder that was added in regard to the pop-up tents and structures, which is what you had asked for last time.
Yeah, that you would leave in. That's not highlighted. It's in blue, but it's not highlighted.
Yep.
Okay,
And again, we're saying that a canopy is a freestanding structure?
no. I think we said a canopy would be attached to the building in some way. But I'm not,
I think we're not defining canopy so that if
So if I'm
a canopy comes up, then the zoning, then Jen or whoever it is who's going to be interpreting it says, well, no, under the definition, it's not secured to the ground and or whatever, this is not a tent, it's a canopy, so it doesn't fall under this.
Yet the definition of canopy does say that it can be secured to the ground and just
Where-
not have walls,
Definition of canopy where?
just in,
we're not
Webster.
defining it in this particular,
okay.
I think that's what we're
ordinance.
trying to avoid.
I'm
is
just
kind of
trying to act like I'm a business owner, for example, as you said.
Well, the other thing is if the
And
town
what-
council wants us to go further and define
Okay,
tents, awnings, umbrellas and canopies and so forth, then they can tell us that and we could add to it if down the road if we need to.
okay, and just to understand from an applicant's point of view, right, if there was someone in town, it is getting hotter in our climate and they wanted to put up what they defined as a canopy and put that up. And it was attached to the ground in some way, the canopy, so it has a structure over an area where they want to shade.
Mhm.
And it is attached to the ground, but it has no sides like a tent would. And they put that up. Are they left wondering if that's legitimately acceptable? Would they have to come to the building official or to Jen and be sure that
They'd have to go to, I'd have to,
before they put anything
they
up?
would probably have to check with Jen before they put it up.
It would also depend on the purpose for which it's being used.
Uh-huh.
Because if you're gonna go down to the general prohibitions, which is what we're looking at next,
Mm.
as it currently stands, the zoning board has determined that tents fall into those similar structures which are prohibited for commercial use. And we're sort of further defining that, but tents are already under there, so canopies would also probably be considered temporary structures if they're used in the manner that is prohibited. So I think it's less a question of what the actual thing is, it's more a question of what type of use it's being put to. And if it's extending sort of that commercial use, which is what I believe the planning board didn't want to see happen.
Yeah.
And who is the enforcement officer, building inspector?
Jen.
Jen.
Enforcement Officer.
Thank you.
Okay.
Okay, so again, if we go down to 111, the general prohibitions. So one thing that I did change is instead of remaining in place, I changed that word to used, because there was some discussion of the fact that tents are usually put up and taken down every night. Again, there's nothing currently in the zoning ordinance that requires that. And I'm not sure if we want to go so far as to require that, but regardless, if you're putting a tent up and taking it down every night and it's an unsightly use, sort of like the issues that have already been addressed, the current ordinance as drafted has it being used for more than 7 days in any month. So that means if you're putting it up and taking it down 7 times in a month, then you're going to be, or you just leave it up for 7 days straight, either one, it's used for 7 days in a month, then it's out there too long. This would also give a little bit of room for businesses to use things on a one-off instance for like different events that they're using. Further down, we do have exemptions as well. So specific circumstances where even the 7-day prohibition wouldn't apply. And those are for catering operations, weddings and private parties. And then we added church events and farmers markets, art shows and other events that have obtained permitting. That was based on the conversation at the last meeting. And then the last change that was made is that the tents that are exempt from the application of this ordinance, this prohibition, are tents that are neutral in color and blend with surrounding environment and with no additional signs other than those which have been permitted. So you have two categories. You have tents that are used on a very infrequent basis, so less than 7 days in any given month. Those would not be prohibited. And then the tents that are neutral color, without additional signage used for those specific things would not be prohibited. All the other tents utilized, and again, it goes back to how they're used, utilized for commercial or industrial activity would be not permissible.
I have a question.
Go ahead, Chris.
So in reference to tents in a neutral color or color that blends in with that statement, that is specifically for A, B, C, D, E, and F below it.
Correct.
Correct.
So that's nonsensical because, and I know we asked for neutral colors, but I was under the impression we were asking, giving HDC guidelines because they would actually oversee the permitting of awnings, umbrella, whatever.
Mhm.
Right? Like this is, in my eyes, this is an HDC
Call.
call. But you're not going to get a catering operation. What's a neutral color? Do you call white a neutral color? I call it the brightest color out there.
I won't say all, but most of them are usually kind of a cream colored, which I would consider a neutral color.
Right. I mean,
Most people don't use white because it gets dirty so quickly.
every catering tent is white. Like you look at what Kimberly uses, you look at what the Spring House uses, you look at what
Are they
the
white?
Sullivan House.
Are
They're
they
bright
white or
white.
cream?
No, they're bright white. We're talking bright white canvas rated to 110 miles an hour. Like they're
Or
industrial
plastic.
tents.
They're almost plastic.
Yeah.
But are they doing events more than 7 days in any given month
No,
with those?
Like a month, probably not. Probably not. You know, they're probably, you know, let's look who the big caterer, like the Sullivan House. I don't think they're doing 7 in a month anymore. They were, but they're not anymore. But the tent might be up more than 7 days,
Yeah, the tent's up more than 7 days.
which is again. So, and that's a commercial operation that's been established for a long time. And I know we're not going to be able to write something that's acceptable to everybody, but I don't want to go down a road where we're going to have to backpedal. And that right there. I don't think the 7-day rule is applicable if it comes down each night. That's my opinion. But the 7-day rule for catering operations, wedding and private parties, like there's commercial catering companies out here, and I'll use the Sullivan House as an example, that have to put up a tent. It might be there for 10 days or more because it's an operation. It's you're constructing, you know, and that's a well-known wedding venue. Why would we hamper that? It's never been an issue before.
I thought they were two different things. Am I misreading this, Michelle? I thought if you were doing one of those operations, catering, weddings, parties, beach, blah, 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 blah,
Those
you
are-
weren't subject to the 7 days. But like if
Correct.
Mary
Yeah.
wanted to put up a tent in front of the Glass Onion, that would be subject to the 7 days.
Is
Am
that,
I right about that? Like in front of a
Yes.
commercial okay,
Yeah. Mhm.
so they're two separate things, correct? We're not
Correct.
saying that catering operations at the Sullivan House is
Is
only
subject
allowed
to
to have
7.
their tent up for 7 days.
Right, catering operations can have their tent up for pretty much as long as they want pursuant to this ordinance. Because they're exempt as long as their tent is in a neutral color or color that blends with the surrounding environment. And I mean, again, that's probably broad enough to include white tents unless the zoning enforcement official were to say, okay, white's not a neutral color. But there's no definition of neutral color, so I think that gives the enforcement official flexibility in determining if it's truly offensive or not offensive.
That's tricky.
Are these all, does there need to be a complaint in order for a zoning official to
Mhm.
go out there and enforce, or can he or she just decide to go out? Just thinking.
I mean, if they notice something, or if somebody at the town notices something and enforcement is desired, then that they are the people who are in charge of the ordinance and making sure it's maintained. So yes, they can make the decision on their own, based on their own knowledge, or they can go out based on a complaint being made. But ultimately, they're the first line of determination of the ordinance here. So they'll determine whether a violation has been made or not. They'll issue a notice of violation. And then if there's a dispute as to whether that's correct, then it goes to the zoning board, just like we saw previously with Harborside. And Harborside upheld the zoning enforcement NOV in that instance, saying that yes, this interpretation and application of the ordinance was correct. So that's basically the procedure here. So what we're doing here is laying out the guidelines for the zoning enforcement officer to enforce in certain circumstance. So if you have a tent that's bright orange, or if you're a business that starts putting up 15 pop-up tents along the street, and they're there for multiple days, obviously it's going to be against this ordinance, and then the zoning enforcement officer can enforce it. If you have a farmer's market and they put up a white tent and nobody complains and the zoning enforcement official doesn't see any violation, then it's not going to be an issue.
Which I understand. But let's keep in mind our zoning official, who is Jen. This department that oversees, like, helps us, is already taxed.
Mhm.
Like, this is my problem with, and I've said it before with us. It's
Yeah.
like, I hate passing ordinances that are more or less unenforceable unless someone complains, and we don't have a dedicated enforcement person. That's their job to go enforce, and
No.
that's their only job. And that's what we're getting to at this point, because here's the thing, someone who complains about the white tents during farmer's market, well then, how is Jen gonna not cite any white tent? Because someone didn't complain about someone else's white tent, or, it's like,
I mean, she can decide that that is a neutral color and that it's not illegal.
right,
That's how she can handle it.
right. But you're gonna get complaints.
You're always going to get complaints. No matter what we do,
So-
we're going to get complaints.
Yeah, and I just, I don't know, I understand why this is in front of us. I just think the enforcement of it is not gonna be,
Well, that,
no slight to
Yeah.
Jen, is gonna be consistent, lawful, or even like attainable.
and tell you the truth, the enforcement issues, we put it together in an ordinance, but it's not really our purview to
Right.
work with enforcement. That is
Right.
another
Yeah.
branch of the operation, shall we say.
Buildings, yeah.
Well, you also wanna, if we're gonna go through these exercises, make it as
You want to.
Absolutely. We want to make it as
Workable.
clear
Yeah.
and workable as possible. I totally agree with you on that.
So remember, as it currently stands, based on the zoning decision in the Harborside matter, any tent used for commercial or industrial activity would fall under this prohibition. So by carving out these specific instances and the time frame, what we're actually doing is carving out tents that are allowed rather than a blanket prohibition, and giving more guidance to said zoning enforcement official in making a call whether or not a tent should be prohibited or not.
Now, didn't we also discuss a permitting process?
So that's another way that we can go. Right now, it's under a prohibition, because again, like I said, that's where it had been previously, and that's what had been determined by the zoning board, that it was prohibited. There is no current permitting process, and again, we get into the overburdened enforcement, because it would fall upon you'd have people coming and applying for tents, and then a whole huge administrative hurdle about the determination whether or not a tent is necessary, whether or not it meets the standards. You'd have to create different standards. It's going to create a huge administrative burden on the other side if we're creating a whole new permitting process for tents.
Which I'm not sure we want to do at this point.
Mhm.
That's a lot of administrative work that I'm not sure we have the staff, the staff to handle it. One other thing I would just mention, and I almost hate to, but I'm going to anyway. Well, you picked 7 days. I know that's no magic number, but I thought there are 4 weekends each month. And I thought maybe we move it to 8 so that if people wanted to put up tents for the extra crowds over the weekend or weather problems, that they could have their tents up Saturday and Sunday of each week rather than 7 days where some weekend you don't even be able to put it up one day. Is that worth looking at or not? Or is that getting too picky?
No, that's reasonable.
That's fine.
So let me ask, because I already went through this exercise with my establishment, because I had a tent, well, what you would call, there used to be a pop-up tent, right?
Okay,
And then we graduated to something that looked a little nicer. I don't know what you would call it in this instance, because it wasn't a pop-up tent and it wasn't a gazebo, but it was a metal structure that held up a canopy. Okay,
pergola.
it's not even a pergola. And then
Not
I
even a pergola.
graduated from that,
That's a
went to
canopy by
HTC,
definition.
and then I went and graduated to what's there now, which is a fixed roof, slanted. It's like a salt
Awning,
box, right? Yeah,
awning.
it's like
Mhm.
it's this thing,
Oh, I see.
right?
It's permanent.
No, it's semi-permanent. Like I could move it if I wanted to.
Okay.
I could take it down if I wanted to,
Doesn't have
but I'm not.
a foundation, is this?
It's not screwed into the ground.
Yeah, yeah.
So, but this was okay by HDC.
Mhm.
So there's a mechanism for owners to go to HDC and say, hey, can I do this or this?
Mhm.
We're not,
That's already in place.
but HDC's got to understand what a tent versus canopy versus like,
Yeah.
there's gotta be, I think you need some like visual examples because we all know what a pop-up tent is. But
Well, I think there's two different concerns here, what HDC will allow and what we're allowing across the town as a whole.
right,
And so like what we're having here is sort of a baseline bottom of what's allowed. And then HDC in their own judgment can be more or less restrictive. Like HDC might be okay with a certain tent because it doesn't change the historical nature, but you as a planning board might not want to see tents in that area. So the interests don't necessarily need to align. Obviously, if you're in the historical district, you need to get HDC permission. But what we're saying here is that there's also a prohibited use of extending business area through that commercial use or industrial activity with tents. So we sort of are looking at a way to carve that out across the entire town. And then the HDC consideration is sort of on top of that in the historic district. So just because it's okay by the HDC doesn't necessarily mean it's okay under the ordinance. And we're
Under the
just trying
general-
to make
well,
sure
see,
that
that raises an interesting question because this expansion of commercial, like who's going to define that? Because there's established businesses that have been out here for 20, 30 years that may have used pop-up tents to create the shade. So it's not an expansion of their commercial operation. For instance, well, I'll use the property that I'm on. Since 1996, there's been an established kayak rental business there. All right. No structure, a picnic table and a pop-up tent.
Mhm.
That's not an expansion of anything. It's existed there. Everything else around it came after. So if you have businesses that have existing uses and have used since the beginning of these uses, you know, like they started out in business and then 10 years later, they started using pop-up tents. That's not an expansion of business. I don't know if that term, I don't know if we want to include that term.
Right.
Expansion of
But
of footprint.
we're really talking about general laws that, I mean, that already, these definitions, is that right in the?
So what
What is
already
the
existed before we
general
even
laws that already
discussed.
exist? I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, I was there with you. What already existed before we ever discussed any of this
Mhm.
was a prohibition against trailers, shipping containers, and similar temporary and or mobile facilities used for any commercial or industrial activity. Dot, dot, dot. So what happened in the Harborside matter was that there was a complaint that was addressed and a notice of violation issued for the use of pop-up tents for storage for commercial activity. And the zoning board determined that tents as used there for that commercial or industrial activity were prohibited under this this ordinance section that already existed. So in theory, whether or not those other businesses that have tents that have used them may or may not be in violation of the zoning ordinance that existed, whether or not they're grandfathered would determine of whether their use existed prior to this old zoning ordinance that already existed. So it would be a case-by-case determination of that pop-up tent use that you mentioned, whether or not that pre-existed this zoning ordinance prohibition that would, in theory, prohibit it. Again, to a certain extent, it's going to come down to enforcement. If nobody has an
Right.
issue with the pop-up tent, then
Right.
it's
Right.
Can I ask what would happen if enforcement measures were taken against a pre-existing use that's using a pop-up tent after this is passed? They'd have to take it down.
they'd either have to take it down or they could appeal if an NOV issued for a pop-up tent
Yep.
based on the ordinance that currently exists or this new ordinance if it were to go into effect. And they said, no, it's a pre-existing use. They could take that to the zoning board in an appeal of the zoning enforcement officials NOV. And the zoning board could either make a determination or say that they can't make a legal conclusion on a non-existing use and defer it to the Superior Court where the person who is objecting to it could file a declaratory judgment action.
Okay.
But again, it'll come down to the zoning enforcement officials. There's nothing that's compelling the zoning enforcement official to issue NOVs here any more so than they've already been issued. In fact, this relaxes some of the standards to allow for more practical use of tents, but at the same time maintaining that prohibition that previously existed.
Okay. I guess with the addition in number 23 of expansion of operations, floor space or storage space, like that's with storage containers, that makes sense. I grasp that, but the expansion of operations, that term in floor space is like if the zoning official is supposed to determine that, it's easy to determine, like, let's say, you know, January 1 going forward, right? Because we already know what exists out there. But to go retroactive would be tough.
Well, the idea is that it's expanding the area of operations. For example, you have a business right on the main street and you want to have additional room for foot traffic. So you put up 3 pop-up tents so that you can put some of your stuff outside. And then like you just keep growing your area. And then if you're going to allow tents for that purpose, then you're just going to see them probably popping up everywhere.
So the owner should pursue an awning.
Perhaps.
Perhaps.
Yeah. And the other thing I wondered is, do we need to limit the size of the tent? I noticed that we have not done that in this, but that was something we talked about.
Well, they're prohibited.
Well, when we down to the, like, the 8 days where it would be permitted, do we need to limit the size of a tent that would be allowed for the 8 days?
I mean, it's 8 days.
I'm
Like,
throwing it out.
if we're actually gonna have a permitting process where someone could, say, wait, we're gonna take this up and down every night, but. HTC says, okay, then I think it would make sense to have a size limit on it.
I just think
But if it's for 8 days,
8 days. But for those 8 days, if it's huge and out of scale with the rest of the area,
Again.
it will look terrible.
that's.
Yeah, I think we're better off with definitions and letting the building department decide on size.
Okay, I'm just throwing it out there so we have it
No.
for
that makes sense.
discussion.
Yeah,
Cause
yeah.
I'll tell you, I was in another state this weekend. I saw the biggest umbrella I've ever seen. It's probably half the size of this room, and it's an umbrella. It folds up into a little corner of a stone
They
pad.
must not have the wind that we have here.
It's a natural selection.
Like, it was big.
It was big.
And I almost took a picture for
Oh,
you.
But it was too windy, they took it down.
2 windy days and they take it down. Okay, so if you don't think we need size, then I'll take that off my list. Those are my things, but I do think I would like to change the 7 to 8. That way, if people wanted to do weekends, they could.
I'm fine with it.
No, I'm fine with
Yeah.
8 too.
Okay. All right, well, I think, is there anything else we need to discuss on this, or can we have Michelle go forward with this? Okay, going once, going twice. Michelle, I think you've got a winner here.
Okay, so what I'll do is, I will take those changes that we made and I'll draft a final version that the planning board can vote on at the next meeting. Does that
That would be
sound-
good, because as you see, we've got 3 members missing for various good reasons, but they are not here.
Okay, so that's what I will do.
Okay, fine, thank you. That's great. All right, going on to number 3. Discussion regarding outdoor lighting ordinances, section 512 of the zoning ordinance. And again, I will turn it over to Michelle to walk us through her examples that she's given us.
So I am coming into this, I know that you guys have had discussions with Allison Ring, and she has done the majority of the work here in terms of getting this drafted. There were a couple of comments at the last board meeting about some concerns about like decorative fairy lights being used for display purposes. And I highlighted a section which did provide for Christmas lights, which was also brought up at the last meeting. But I'm not sure if there was a strong feeling that we needed to provide an exemption for like decorative string lights, and how we would define them and how we would limit them.
Temporary lighting. I think.
Yeah, I think
I
that was
think
the
you said
limit was
temporary lighting.
temporary lighting,
And
seasonal
I
temporary.
know some people have limited it to 30 days, but I think we need out here, we need a longer time for temporary displays. For example, our lobster pot tree goes up before Thanksgiving, and it usually stays until around the 10th to the 15th of January. So instead of saying 30 days, I would say probably 50 or 60 days.
So
Fine.
right now for holiday lighting,
Yeah, what does it say?
it just says a reasonable period before and after the holiday
Okay,
and
that's
minimized
fine.
after 11 PM. So that way we don't have a specific day
Fine.
number.
That's
Yep.
very good. Okay. I
The
like
question is whether or not non-holiday lighting, for example, like fairy light displays in shop windows or stuff like that is
Well, we
something.
have
that-
a couple of restaurants that use the little lights. For example, Kimberly's has her part of her open area outside with the lights, and I want to make sure that that stays, because it's a very nice thing to have off season to be able to find out whether or not she's open.
Yeah.
But I don't know how we do that.
That would be below the lumens though. It's not bright.
No, it's not
Don't we
bright.
have like,
Yeah.
there's a brightness count, like I think
Yeah,
that's below
yeah.
that. Those lights are, because the string lights. are
Yeah, the
usually-
string light. That's what I'm
Yeah.
talking about,
Not-
string lights,
They're
yeah.
not above what's our threshold for, doesn't we have a
It's,
threshold for lumens?
yes,
They're
it's-
not above that. Because I thought the same thing.
What you could also do is exempt, business decorative lights and use between certain hours. Or in certain zones.
You just say while open,
While
Yeah.
open, yes, because
because you don't want them on while they're not.
you don't want them on when they're not open.
But yet we do have things that are on when businesses aren't open, like televisions in the front window to advertise homes for sale. Those remain on after the business is closed.
That's a loophole.
Well, I don't think that those would fall under decorative lights.
Yeah.
I mean,
It's just lit lights up the street when you walk by, but it's not considered lighting.
Nope.
Okay,
That's not.
okay. It's like the big umbrella.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Well, because HDC doesn't allow you to put in LED signs,
Correct.
it's not that,
Yeah.
so they just set the
Neon,
desk up.
so
Yeah,
they- yeah.
so they set the desk up with a
Yeah.
nice big monitor at the,
Right,
that you can see coming
that's
from
a
the window.
window. Yeah, yeah. Okay, thank you.
Right.
and then just
There is
Going-
a,
down to,
let's go through, let's
purpose.
start at the beginning and go down.
Okay.
Under, for example, under purpose, I'd like to add in wildlife.
Yes, I
That
agree.
is not mentioned in that, one of the.
I'm sorry. Where are you?
Number A,
Purpose.
under outdoor lighting, purpose.
Mhm.
Reasonable use of outdoor lights, with concern for health, safety, privacy, blah, blah, blah. I want to add wildlife into that.
Okay.
Thank you.
Anybody else have any questions about purpose?
No.
Okay,
I liked that it was,
Only that, I think, sorry.
Go ahead.
I think that's meant to say why we're allowing lighting. Are we allowing lighting for wildlife or? Sorry.
for the reasonable use of,
under reasonable use,
with
Sorry.
concern
I don't mean
for
to be-
wildlife. No, it's a good question. With concern for.
With-
I read that as why to allow lighting.
oh,
As
okay,
opposed
I
to-
read it, we would, where we were regulating it,
I think
was
we're-
to protect the, health, safety and so forth, that would be protecting wildlife.
I think where
But
you
you-
want to
but you don't
include
get it here.
wildlife is under goals to protect
Okay.
residents, the environment, wildlife from effects. of
Okay,
light
I'll go with that.
pollution. Just, I'm sorry.
I didn't look at it from your perspective, but what you're saying makes perfectly good sense.
Okay, sorry.
So,
I don't read it
That's
that,
fine.
I don't read it that way at all. I read it with, that's the appropriate place to have it, but if people feel more comfortable moving it, I'm okay with that.
I want it in there somewhere. I don't care where it is.
Because the purpose is to allow for reasonable use with the concern for health, concern for
Yeah, let's
wildlife,
see, I read it as being concerned for health, for welfare,
for welfare,
privacy.
for wildlife.
I'm
safety,
perfectly
wildlife.
happy to let this one go. I read it differently, but
Since there is an
Never mind.
opening for confusion on how we read it, that if you want, we can put it under goals, which is to protect wildlife. So that's, which makes me happy, that's fine.
Was there a consensus which way we wanted to go?
It would just then raise the other question, if you're reading wildlife with that regard, are you reading also health, welfare, privacy, safety with that regard, security?
I see lighting as being something that promotes health, welfare, privacy, safety, security, productivity, commerce, and enjoyment. So throwing wildlife in there, that is something we're protecting.
So I
as
guess my
opposed to-
question is.
Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I
Okay.
definitely know what you're saying. I
Yeah.
just
Yeah.
want to really be sure we get it right.
Well, let's
So from-
let's put it under goals, then
I think it
with
fits better
purpose,
there.
you could read it either way and it makes sense.
I understand. I guess I'm asking another new question. Is the word concern strong enough here where you're saying the purpose of this section is to allow for the reasonable use of outdoor lighting with concern for example, health, welfare, privacy, safety, security?
Let me see, I found this very good outdoor lighting regulations for Connecticut on the internet.
Oh, great. What did they? how
And
did
let
they-
me see what they said for their purpose. It reads, the purpose of these regulations is to set lighting standards to reduce glare, raise public awareness about the need to conserve energy and reduce light pollution,
Mm.
avoid sky glow caused by upward illumination, avoid light trespass onto adjacent properties
Mhm.
and public streets, improve public safety through proper lighting, and reduce light pollution, which contributes to the wildlife mortality, reduce visibility of the night sky, and adverse impacts on human health. That's how they describe their purpose.
That gets around Claire's concern.
That gets around Claire's
That it
concern.
becomes
And
clearer,
I took that's right out of the
which
section of
purpose,
these model outdoor lighting regulations for Connecticut is where I
Mhm.
got this from.
I like the way that's written. It's
I have no
clear.
problem borrowing it, and I could have Michelle look this up and find it in on the internet. It is, I thought, very good, and I see no reason why we have to keep reinventing the wheel when we can borrow some out of this.
No, and that
So would that
solves
replace?
Claire's concern. It's hard to use the word concern again.
Would that
It's
replace then
clearer.
purpose and goals? We
Yeah,
just
it
replace
becomes-
it with that.
Yeah.
So is that gonna replace both purpose and goals?
It's just a purpose.
I think it encompasses both those
It
things.
has both purpose and goals, so yes, you could do that. Anyway,
Yeah, it's cleaner.
Yeah.
yes,
That's, I think, helpful.
I
for
can scan
the
it,
reader.
email it to her,
fine.
if that
Okay.
works.
Yeah, and as I said, it's on the internet. I got it reference from the Night Sky Compliant link that I sent you guys.
Oh, great.
It was it got from there to this thing, so yeah, it's not that difficult.
And
Fine.
if you want to just provide either Karen or I with an email of it, then we can drop it right in.
Okay. All right, that's fine. Okay. Okay, going on to applicability, number C.
Oh, sorry.
You've got temporary lighting in here. You've got the minimum lighting associated with proper display of national and state flags. What about street lights and our harbor dock lights? Those need to stay on, in my opinion. They should be staying on all night for health and safety reasons.
Well, there's certainly insurance code and everything else.
Well, not only that, but we've had examples of people who have, shall we say, been imbibed too much.
Yeah.
And so you definitely need street lights and dock lights on all night. You don't want to lose them over.
So would that be required by federal, state, or local law?
Probably.
Well, if there's private docks, not necessarily, but. I would
Which
think
is why I was going to list it separately rather than there, but I just want to make sure it's in there somehow. Because under exemptions, because I think street
So-
lights,
Harbor dock lighting?
yeah, harbor dock lighting and street lights.
Is there any time frame or is it exempt all the time?
I'm sorry, I didn't understand your question.
Is there time?
Like, is
frame?
there,
Yeah.
is there time is there a time frame or are we allowing 24-hour lighting in
It would
those
be,
situations?
it would be all night, all night.
If there are federal, state, or local codes they have to follow, then I would have C under exemptions read lighting used at the airport, on roads, or on docks that are required by federal, state, or local law, because I think we want all other lighting on docks and streets to not be allowed, only the things that are required by. I could just see a dock saying, oh, well, lighting is allowed on a dock, so I'm gonna put up
Okay,
lighting everywhere.
Oh,
You know what
okay,
I
good.
mean?
All right,
So I
that's
think we
fine.
want to say that lighting,
sure, just take C and I like your idea. Lighting used at the Block Island State Airport, dock lights and street lights as
that are
required by
required.
federal, state, or local law.
Right, or shall conform to the, as you say, in
Sure.
one.
Oh, sure,
To the
conform,
state.
okay,
in fact, going back to one that pops up again in your applicability. New installations, all outdoor lights installed after the effective date of this ordinance shall conform to the standards, or requirements set forth herein, regardless of the reason for their installation. Comes to mind to make that clear, much like in C.
Okay.
I don't know if I totally understand that.
I don't understand where.
Back on 1. New installations.
All outdoor lighting installed after
Installed
the
after
effective date of this ordinance shall conform to the standards set forth
Herein,
herein, okay?
regardless of the reason why they're newly installed.
Okay,
Could you give me an example? I don't quite understand.
I guess I'm thinking of the dog. The
Okay.
dog feels so suddenly free form, like the light's gonna be on all night.
Well, think about,
like,
let's take Old Harbor
regardless.
Dock, right? So Old Harbor Dock is a commercial dock.
Mhm,
You have to have lights on,
right,
period.
yeah,
Like,
for
you
public
have to.
safety, you have to.
Well, it's
yeah.
just, I mean, it's a commercial dock, so if we're
Right.
charging commercial fishermen, they might get in at whatever, 2 o'clock in the
Yeah,
morning.
right.
There's gotta be lighting. Usually dock lighting is like pedestal height
Mhm,
shining down on the
down,
dock.
yeah, for
Yeah, we
safety,
could-
their
It's not
safety.
streetlights.
no, it's not streetlight. We can say other places that we want all lights to shine, be pointed down. I know, I'm pretty sure it's been said
Yes,
somewhere in
true.
here.
The other consideration for docks is simple navigation, right? So let's take Champlain's, it sticks out the furthest.
Mhm.
So if I was the owner of Champlain's, I would want the end of that dock lit up all the time just
Mhm.
because.
You don't want to
anybody running into it.
Exactly.
People do that even if it's lit up.
I wasn't going to say
But-
that, but you're right.
You don't want the canopy, like the top of the bar lights on, you want the
Mhm.
pedestal lights on.
Yes,
So, I think that again is, would be a, possibly an enforcement or enforcement officer decision, like
yeah.
someone.
And be sure to talk into the mic so she can
Sorry.
hear you.
So. Specific at docks and some, some insurance requires certain lighting. You have to have a minimum amount of lighting, and I don't know if that's state, local, or federal law.
That's all right, we'll put all 3 in, so,
But I'm saying
Okay.
it might not be state, local, or federal law, but it is an insurance requirement, so to be
okay.
insured.
We could add insurance to that,
Okay,
required by federal, state, or local law, or by,
insurance carrier,
by an insurance carrier or insurance company, whatever's the proper.
because that's
terminology.
easily like supported, like
Yeah,
someone could
You
say,
either
hey,
have a
Yeah.
regulation or you don't.
my insurance company requires me to have this.
Yeah, and then you show them the piece of paper that says that.
Right.
Okay. Anything else on page 1 before we go on?
Back to the
Yeah,
business
a time
decorative
frame?
lighting.
Okay,
Is there any sort of manner that you guys want to restrict the business decorative lighting other than the time frame of the hours that it's open for business? And just decorative lighting can, like, I know the intention is to allow for like fairy light displays and like the outdoor decorative lighting for the restaurants. But I mean, if somebody has a huge spotlight on something, obviously that's not going to be what the goal is here, and could they consider that decorative lighting?
I think when it comes to something like that, isn't the actual standards would come into effect, right? Like the lamps.
Or we just don't exempt it and then the standards would come into effect. If we're exempting it, then the standards would not come into effect.
Well, when I say the standards, I mean the actual physical like the lumens, the wattage, et cetera. Like I understand what you're saying, like if someone's gonna put up an outdoor display and light it up all night and it's beyond the you know, color, what is this, like F6. So if you're saying if we exempt it, it doesn't have to conform with any of the standards, so yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So these exemptions that we have here don't have to conform with the below standards.
Right.
So if what we want is lights within those standards, then they don't need to be exempted, if that makes sense.
Mhm.
Yeah. Again, I don't think it's gonna get abused. It's one of those things where,
Don't put that into the universe.
yeah, you never know. But
Do,
So-
do prohibitions supersede exemptions? Because we have under prohibitions,
We could add
the
some more things under
searchlights,
prohib-
beacons, uh, blink, flash, move, revolve.
oh yeah,
They do not, which is why you have the exemptions. So
No.
if you didn't have Christmas lights in there as an exemption, obviously they would be prohibited because they blink and change color. That's why they're an exemption. So they're not prohibited.
We also people do lights for Halloween. We do have a large community gathering for Halloween and so forth. So we do want to have something in there that has to do with the decorative lights, seasonal
Holiday.
lights.
I think
Yeah, holiday
temporary-
lights are definitely in there. The question
Yeah.
is whether decorative lights associated with if we want to also include an exemption for decorative lights associated with business that are not holiday related.
Well, since a couple of our businesses have used the little white lights to outline their outdoor area, I think it would be appropriate to put that in as acceptable.
Well, white lights, as long as they don't blink, flash, or move,
Okay,
and they
We certainly
meet
don't
the
want
other
them flashing.
standards below, should be permissible.
okay.
What about, sorry, down below, I feel like this has maybe already been solved by K and L down below, architectural and landscape lighting standards and then signage lighting standards. Does that solve the problem that we're trying
Where are you, Claire? K and
to,
L?
page
Okay, now-
4?
Okay, we haven't gotten there yet, yeah.
That would solve the problem unless we exempt them. So if we are exempting business decorative lighting from the rest of this analysis, then those wouldn't apply at all.
But I think I like what's here and maybe I'm misunderstanding, but are you talking about?
Perhaps the
just
answer is we
using-
don't need to
using-
exempt the business
Right,
decorative lighting, that should probably be covered within the rest of the standards, that what we want to allow should otherwise already be allowed, so we don't need to exempt it.
right,
on landscape lighting specifically, I think.
yeah.
Okay,
Yeah. Eaves, roofs, overhangs, structures, stuff like that.
And you know, if Kimberly wanted to put up lights around her sign or something like that's under.
she has it around on her kind of that outdoor
Trees?
patio.
Pretty
Okay,
much
so
every business
landscape
does.
lighting,
Right.
yeah, yeah.
Any business with outdoor dining has.
Has to
Right.
have some kind of lighting.
So I think it's already good, we're good.
Okay, I just want to make sure that is, as I know she's using, I think Deadeye Dick's had it in their backyard. You need to define your area where you're going to have people sit for either drinks or dinner.
Again, I think if it doesn't follow under the direct prohibitions where the lights blink, flash, move, or revolve, and then it meets the other standards below, then they shouldn't be an issue.
Okay. All right, then let's go on to under prohibitions. I have a couple again that I picked up out of the Connecticut one. They said that strips of light extended to outline or highlight a structure would not be permitted. They said electronic signboards would not be permitted or prohibited. Billboards or rooftop signs would be prohibited. And flared tube lights that project above a horizontal plane would not be permitted. So I don't know whether you want to include any of those or not, but I did pick them up from the various recommendations from this Connecticut one. That was strips of lighting extending to outline or highlight a structure, electronic signboards, billboards and rooftop signs. And the other was the flared lights that project above a horizontal plane, which I'm not sure would apply to us. I don't think we have any of that, but I just wanted to bring those to
Mhm.
your attention.
No, those are good. Mm.
Do we want to insert all of those in wholesale?
Yeah, why don't we put them in, and then when we look at the document next month, if it looks like it's over regulated, we could pull a couple of those out.
Mhm.
But I think that, and again, I will send you this thing that you'll see where I've taken this from.
Okay, it's that, I'm reading other ordinances too, they refer to, that light you referred to is interesting to me. Is it a sky beam, the one you described that goes up from the building? Margie, could you repeat that one again?
It said flared lights that project above a horizontal plane.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
I just thought these
Mhm.
things are could be very strong lights, and they
Yeah.
really mess up the dark sky.
Right, makes sense.
So let's put them in, and then we can take a look at them again next month. And I will, as I said, I will send this to Michelle so she can get it in context, because I just made notes of very quickly.
Mhm.
Any questions on definitions?
Oh, sorry, can I go back to just one thing before we
Oh,
get too
sure.
far ahead?
I thought I was through. Go ahead.
No, my fault. Did you establish, Michelle, under applicability on page 1? Did we want to put in a date? You said you left that blank, insert a date. Did I miss that?
We can't insert a date until it passes the town council.
Okay, so they can say like 5 years or something.
Yeah,
Okay, go ahead. Sorry, go on, Mark.
that's okay. We could, once we figure out when it passes the town council, we could.
Okay.
But, or we can talk about that next month and see if we want to insert a date. I was just thinking
Okay.
that until town council passes it, we don't know when it takes effect.
Okay,
Now, I have a question like architectural lighting, like on the Manassas, which actually makes the building look really nice.
I would, as long as it's low level lighting, I don't,
Well, you've seen it, haven't you?
Yeah.
It's projected onto the building. Like it's an architectural feature.
as long as it's low level, low enough.
Like
so
it's
that
not bright.
It's not
yeah, it's not bright.
Right.
leading on to the next.
And what
It's not like
about,
a searchlight.
what about, no,
Right.
what about lighting like on the cupola at the National? I think that lights a flag, right? So that would be okay.
That would be okay. That lights a flag.
Okay.
And again, this is part of the restaurant, so as long as the lights go off when they stop doing business.
Well, some of them don't, like the Springhouse porch lights stay on all night. because
Yes, they
they're
do.
open.
So again, I look upon that as a health and safety issue, because some people are gonna come in
Yeah,
at 1 or
right,
2
yeah.
o'clock in the morning.
As long as there's answers for these.
Yeah.
Because I'm going through all that,
Yeah.
In my
I know,
mind,
right,
like-
yeah.
okay, and then.
What we're trying to do is get enough so the people who wanna go out and study the sky can go out and do so without having so much light that they can't see the stars or the moon or whatever.
Well,
they're
yeah, I
studying.
mean, just go south, you'll be fine,
Yeah,
because the lights, like seriously, you go north, the lights from the mainland screwed up.
yeah,
It's not even Block Island, it's
Yeah.
the light from the mainland.
so,
I mean,
okay. All right, anything else on page
Some.
2 before we go to page 3? Okay, on to page 3 then. Okay, I have one, under general standards, again, going back to this Connecticut one, would be a number 7, all outdoor lighting, including but not limited to landscape and decorative lighting, shall be controlled by an automatic timer or a motion sensor that turns off lights from blank to blank. I thought maybe 1 AM to 6, but it's blank to blank right now. We'll fill in the lights. Turns off lights or turns off lights after 15 minutes of no activity. Exception would be, of course, street lights, which we've already talked about under a different area.
Mhm.
You want me to read that again, or did you get it?
I got it.
Okay,
I
I
agree.
got the gist of it, but you'll provide that.
I'm gonna give you, see that you get this thing, or at least reference where you can find it on the internet. And if I find it once, I can find it twice, and if I can't, then we'll scan it and send it to you. I had no other questions on the rest of the page of page 3. Does anybody else have any thoughts, concerns, questions? Okay, going on to page 4. And this is regulations for Coast Guard or other federal state agencies. Again, I don't have any questions. Ordinance would be enforced by, we will insert whoever's going to do it. The town one's probably Jen, but I will make sure that that's what she would be doing. Okay,
Do we,
so anything else for Michelle before she puts this together for us to see next month?
Is there any recommendation as to the position of who should interpret it? Are we're zoning enforcement official?
I would
Has to
think
be-
so,
it
yeah.
has to be
it has to
consistent with everything
building.
else.
Yeah, I think it has to be, again, I think that's Jen Brady. And insert her title, whatever it is.
The zoning enforcement, yeah.
Yeah.
Zoning
Zoning
enforcement officer.
Oh, another thing already came up in my reading of looking at other light ordinance was some other towns specifically mentioned environmentally sensitive areas that were more protected from extensive lighting. Like, do we want to have a note about do we have any environmentally sensitive areas, land that for habitat purposes should have some conservation restriction for lighting on it? Again, that just came up in reading other small town ordinances like us,
Mhm.
but maybe we don't have that.
Yeah, I don't even know what that definition would be. You mean like
Yeah.
a wildlife refuge?
Yeah, or would it be
But there's nothing up
the
there.
borders of
Yeah.
areas that have conservation land? But then that falls into the restrictions that already exist for light ordinances and private homes along.
think it's
edge of
covered.
Conservation land, so I think we're good on that.
Okay. Very good. I mean, we can always add to something for next month if we come up
Yeah.
with
Okay.
problems of something that we've forgotten. Or something occurs to us over the various weeks as we think about
Okay.
things. Okay, let's move on now to number 4, which is discuss boundary lines of the historic district. Amanda, if you would read the notes that HDC put together at their, well, I think it was their last meeting.
The consensus was to add specific properties to the district. So I have both sides of Connecticut Avenue to Old Mill Road, Ocean Ave where it meets West Side Road, and Ocean Ave to Beach Ave. The Mott property, the Barrington, the DBA's property, and then the Gustafson property, the 2 houses that are right there. We are putting, it is back on the agenda for our next meeting in November. We're gonna take the plot maps and line up the district with the plot maps and
So maybe. we should-
compare,
Okay.
but that is the list that I was given.
Okay, do we want to continue on this, or do you want to wait until next month after we get the recommendations from HDC?
Yeah, I would rather see the maps.
I would
From
rather have,
HDC.
I know this was set later than today, but I still think we need the
Oh, I didn't
plat
see those.
maps that show,
Oh, I'm sorry.
yeah.
These flags is current district on it. But it doesn't, it shows the zoning districts, it doesn't show the plats and lots.
I think we need a plats and lots. I would have an extra one because I made some notes on mine.
It does, this one's the zoning district, it's not the plots and oh my gosh, plats and lots. So we were going to compare with the plat map at the next meeting.
I would recommend that we roll this over until December, when we have plat maps lot regulation, lots, showing plats and lots.
Right?
And recommendations from the Historic District Commission, and then we start taking a look at it. Anybody agree or disagree?
I agree.
Okay,
Yeah, I think,
and if there's anything in particular you want HDC to look at, Chris, let's make a recommendation that they specifically look at X, Y,
I
Z.
just find it odd that there's already parcels carved out that aren't in, so I think, when I think HDC, I think it should coincide with the other zones. So right now we have a bunch of parcels that are in the RB zone that are in historic. Why?
Are you looking at the little squares that aren't, or
I
the,
don't know what I'm looking at. I'm looking at the dark line that says historic district overlay.
Yeah.
yes,
And then I'm looking, let's just take SC, for instance.
They don't have to agree, Chris.
Yeah, I know, but that's what bothers me. I think it should.
Well, not necessarily. You have to
There-
look at how the property is used.
some of those, the little squares
Mm.
are just different circumstances.
Mm.
My understanding is that they are properties that opted to get put in.
Into the HDC.
Yes,
Interesting.
Right, like the one on West Side Road.
right.
McDougal's.
Yeah, they
property.
voted to, or applied or whatever to go in. So
So Chris's question, even the ones back behind the power company, those people all opted in? That doesn't seem, I feel like that's all.
that's why I think we need the lot and plat, maps to look at a little more
And
carefully.
the ones on
Yes.
High Street, you know, back behind, what is
Yeah.
that, like Continental Pond?
I know that some people have talked about, they'd like to see part of Spring Street moved from mixed use to them, but that's not really historic district. Oh, it could be. Anyway, I think we need some more information before we
Yeah.
go into this. Okay, great. Then I will make a recommendation that we wait until next month and pick it up when we have better maps showing the lots and the plat lots. Okay, we do not have minutes. So we will roll that over until next month. And is there any other business before we adjourn?
Thank you.
Okay, then I'll make a motion that the meeting be adjourned. Do I have a second?
Second.
Okay, all those in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Anyone oppose? Thank you guys very much for coming. This is great. Michelle, thank you for all your work on this. We appreciate it very much. We will look forward to seeing you next month.
Thank you. Have a great month.
Good. Okay, thank you, guys.